But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you today. And I want to just talk to you briefly on public education, and I will save some time for question and answers. As you probably know, public education has been in the news a lot over the past 5 to 7 years. And the statement is, our education system is broken. I don't think it is. I don't think that our education system is broken. I think that we have and are producing some of the best minds in this nation today. I do know that there are some problems in public education, as with any large operation the size of public education. But there are some reasons for those problems. I just returned from Orlando, Florida for 2 weeks at a conference that I was attending. And I talked with one of a professor from China, and he was telling us, he did a presentation, he was telling us how they seek to hire Americans because they think critically. And in their country, their education system, which by the way is a system that we are attempting to emulate in this country, or many are pushing that we emulate that, I should say. But in their country, their kids are taught to think in an algorithmic way. And he said, we don't need that. We seek Americans because they think critically. They think outside the box. They come up with things that we don't think about. So I would say that our system isn't broken. But I will tell you this. Our system is under assault today. It's under assault by the wealthy and special interest groups. And the reason that it's under assault, it's not under assault because we want to take all of these kids and make them great. That's not the reason. Our system is under assault today because of the money in public education. And you can see that money being pulled out of public education if you go to charter schools. And there are a lot of them, and there are a lot of them being created every day. And in fact, as Nina said, I grew up in Waco, Texas. I attended a segregated school. I was in a segregated area. I watched my mom serve as a short order cook at a place called Woolworth at a counter that I wasn't allowed to sit at. And I never want to see that again, but yet today 80% of our schools are segregated. Las Vegas just passed laws to make all of their schools now, or all of their students, voucher. So that means that they can go anywhere that they want and the money will follow them. And that's not a good thing. That's something we fought against with Title I. That's something right now that's on the table in Washington with the authorization of ESE, the Elementary Secondary Education Act, commonly known as No Child Left Behind. And if that passes, it's going to be a big problem for public education. I said that there are some problems in public education, and there are. But I think those problems are fallout of a bigger problem. Often we are compared to Finland and the great system that they have. But it's kind of interesting, the people that compare us to them, they pick and choose. They look at the achievement in Finland, but they will not look at the poverty rate there. They will not look at the professional development that they give their teachers. And by the way, Finland is 100% unionized. And understand, I have some issues with unions. I'm retired military, and I was on the other side of that. But there's a place for unions in this nation, because I really believe without unions, we would not have a middle class. We would not have a middle class, and it's shrinking today. But if you look at our public schools, it's not by coincidence that our highest failing schools are in our highest poverty rate. I teach in Southeast San Diego, and I will retire this year, but I teach there 3rd grade. Every year I have homeless kids. This year I have 3. Every year I have kids coming to school with no shoes, and we buy them. My wife and I buy them. They are dressed inappropriately, so we buy them clothes where the other kids don't make fun of them. And you have to do that. If you want to teach these kids, they have to be able to come in a classroom and sit down and focus on you, not on who's looking at them or who's laughing at them, because I'll tell you, as much as I love kids, they are honestly terrible to other kids. And they are. I mean, if you ever want to know the truth, ask a third grader. You know, when I go in, I say, God, I comb my hair, does it look good? Well, Mr. Freeman, it's all white. And one kid says, and I love them because of that. If you ask them a question, they tell the truth. And if anything happens in your house and that third grader sees it, I'll know about it within the week, I guarantee you. But public education today is under attack, and we're losing. Now, there are many that do not believe that, but we are losing. We're losing this battle. It's not seen so much in California because of the passage of Proposition 30. But last week, the past 2 weeks, I met with teachers from around the country. And they're starving. They're being choked financially, being forced to go charter. And when they go charter, they they get much different pay, much less pay, and they don't get the benefits that they have. There's a charter school in San Diego. I won't call the name, but I guarantee you, all of you know where it is. Some entrepreneur, and it was somewhat of a setup because I seldomly would turn down speaking engagements because I wanted to like public education, but this was filled by a lot of the supporters of charters, and they were saying how public education is broken. And just so happened I had been reading some research that had been done on charter schools because we had started organizing charter schools. And the CEO of that school made $625,000 a year. And a teacher with a master's degree and 5 years experience made $42,000 a year. And they had to pay for part of their health insurance. That's kind of what's happening to public education. And I will tell you again, the group that's hijacking public education, they are being successful right now. One other thing that I just want to mention is the Common Core standards. We've taught kids for many, many years, and God, I started teaching kids to justify their answers. So when they would come up with an answer, now, not so much math when 2 + 2 is 4. I think that's pushing it a little bit too far, and we're having kids to do that today. But I think that's pushing it a little bit too far. But when they would come up with statements of fact, I would have them to research that, to make sure that it's factual, and not just pick it out of an article and then quote it again, because we worked a lot on perspectives. Well, if any of you have looked at the tests that your kids or that the kids are taking today, it tears me apart to see the kids take that test because they can't pass it. As a teacher, I refused to take that because I was out of the classroom for 4 years. They put this test in front of me and says, here, take this test. This is what our kids are going to be taking. This is the Common Core state standards. And I looked at it, and I looked at some of those questions and says, this doesn't make sense. One of them was quantitative reasoning, and it said the 725, explain the greater number, 725 versus 350. Explain it, but do not use numbers. And I said, wait, quantitative, and you don't want the kid, third graders and you don't want them to use numbers, my kids are going to fail this. They are going to fail this test. And that was one of the more simple ones. And I'm not saying kids should not be assessed. They should be assessed. But I think that we need to do them reasonably. All of our kids, all of your kids, and I guarantee you, I shouldn't say all, the greater majority of the kids that take that test, I guarantee you, failed that test. And I think that the test is intended for the kids to fail. Because I don't think it's about the kids improving. I think it's about money. Because if all kids could pass that test, there would be no need to take that test. And I think it's a sin to use our kids in the manner in which we're using them, but we don't have a say in that matter. Those decisions are made at a much higher level than we are. And quite frankly, I think that we need to relook our system. Because right now in Washington, many of the decisions that are being made are pushed by the wealthy and special interest groups. And I'll tell you, unions are one of the special interest groups. Being a president of the Education Association was not on my bucket list, never near it. The only reason I chose that, or I got to that position, was because I went to a school that was telling me what to teach, how to teach it, and when to teach it. But they didn't know the kids. They didn't know my kids. I had kids that could not read, yet they had to read for 2 hours a day. So I had to stay after school to teach the kids to read because I knew that they couldn't read and I knew that they need phonics, but I wasn't allowed to teach that. So I decided, well, I'm retired from the military. Everybody was afraid to speak up. I said, I'm retired from the military. I can go home and collect my retirement, so I'll speak up. So I started speaking up. I got a following, and that's kind of how I got to be the president of the union. Not everyone agreed with me. Not all the teachers agreed with me as the president. And I'm sure some of you saw it some years back where the district was in financial trouble in San Diego Unified, the big second largest district in the state of California. They were going to have to lay off 1,500 teachers in order to make their budget. Or the teachers were going to have to do. And so the teacher said, have the money. Well, I knew they didn't have the money, but I had to go through, scrubbing their records and letting everyone know, well, still you have those handful of teachers that want their money. And it's not just teachers, it's in any business, because people are people, I think. So anyway, we sat down with the district, we delayed the raise, and we retained the employment of those educators. And I would do that again today. I have some educators in San Diego that hate me today as a result of that. But I would do it again today because I didn't do it for the teachers. I didn't do it for the district. I did it for the kids. I did it for those kids that I know if I left the classroom would cry, and I know if another teacher came in, it'll take that teacher probably a month or two before the kids were willing to take risk with that teacher, before they would yell out an answer, before they would stand up and work a math problem on the board. Those are things that you have to work up to with kids. Kids are very distrusting, and well, they should be. It takes a while or some time for you to gain their trust. And so public education today is in big trouble, I think. Not so long ago, I went to New Orleans, Louisiana, and it was, prior to that, New Orleans had, I think it was 107 or 111. This was about a year and a half ago. They had schools. And if you ever want to see what education looks like absent public education, because all of those schools, they still had a lot of schools, but only 6 of them were public schools. All the rest of them were private charters, and they were well segregated. The public schools were not, but they were very poor, a very poor population. and the schools were in disarray. And that's where I think that we can't turn this around. Greater issue in our society is two. It's income inequality, and everyone talks about it, but no one does anything about it, and it's tax fairness. It's going to catch this country. It has to. It's going to catch us off guard, and it's going to hurt us. The employment rate that we think is going down, it's going down. But the people that are being reemployed are not being reemployed with the jobs that they lost. And you can talk to most people around that have lost a job and gotten a job. They aren't getting the money that they had, they aren't getting the benefits that they had. So we are having problems today in public education, and we need all the help that we can get. And I really do believe we're losing this battle because the media, I think the media is paid for by many of these special interest groups and wealthy, and you only hear that public schools are broken, and that we need to fix them, and the only way that we can fix them is privatize them. The last thing that I'm going to tell you about is a situation we had in San Diego with the charter, and then I'll take questions, particularly since since my timing was off. We had a school in San Diego, Promise Charter School was the name of it. It was a high-achieving school. By the way, the charters get their students from public schools, but they are very particular about the students that they get. If they get kids that do not test proficient, we get them back in mass numbers just before testing. But anyway, so this school was there, and all of a sudden we started getting teachers and parents coming asking us to help them. At the time, we were never involved in charters, just with public schools. And I told them, no, we can't do that. Well, one parent came to my office one evening, really in tears, and she said that they had the board had changed their schools to uniforms, but they only notified the parents that supported them. The parents that argued against them, they didn't notify them that they had a uniform requirement starting the next week. So obviously their kids showed up not in uniform. They made those kids stand and face a wall until 10 minutes before their lunch period was over, and then they let them go and eat. It was raining outside. So those kids stood there in the rain for 20 of the 30 minutes, they probably got about 35 minutes. Then they allowed them to rush and eat. The reason that they did that was because they wanted to run those parents away from that school. We ended up having that serious violation of the ed code. Then the only other thing that I will say is in San Diego, when I left Waco, Texas, I had never seen a segregated school until I went to New Orleans. But since that time, I've seen one in San Diego, and it's a charter. And that's where we're going back if we can't get a handle on public education, because it's not the school that many of us grew up in. So with that being said, I will stop and I will entertain any questions that you have. Yes.